ever get that feeling? Like you're about to totally choke right when it matters most.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, like right before a big presentation at work or maybe trying to nail a tough guitar riff.
Totally. And that inner voice starts doing you no favors.
Exactly. It's like this inner critic just loves to sabotage
They
us.
say we're our own worst critics for a reason, right?
So true. And, it's funny because this whole idea isn't exactly new.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Back in the 70s, there was this tennis coach, W. Timothy Galway.
Heard of him, yeah.
He wrote this book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it became a total classic.
It's one of those books that goes way beyond the sport itself. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just for tennis players at all.
Right. It's about mastering any skill, really, from music to business to relationships.
Totally. And Galway worked with everyone, by the way, from total beginners to pro athletes.
He even coached executives at huge companies like Apple.
Exactly. Which shows you how universal these principles really are. So, what's this inner game all about? Well, Galway's big idea is that we all have these two selves kind of duking it out inside us.
Like a tennis match happening in your own head.
Right. And this is key to understanding why we sometimes self-sabotage.
It's such a simple concept, but man, it's powerful when you really get it.
Okay, so on one side, we have self one.
The one that keeps the score, right?
Exactly. The inner critic, always overthinking, judging, stressing us out.
Am I good enough? Am I doing it right? Always second guessing everything.
Yes. And then there's self two. This is like our naturally gifted self, the one who can just do things without all that mental chatter.
It's like that feeling when you're just in the zone, you know? You're not even thinking, you're just doing.
Yes. Like when you hit that perfect tennis serve without even trying, or the words just flow effortlessly when you're writing.
Yeah, like that natural talent that we all have,
Mm,
but often stifle with self-doubt.
exactly. And Galway has all these great stories in the book that really bring this to life.
Oh, I love his stories. They're so relatable.
Okay, so there's this one about a student named Joan who just couldn't seem to hit the ball.
Oh, yeah, poor Joan could just feel her frustration, right?
Right. She kept hitting the frame of the racket instead of the ball, and you can just imagine how demoralizing that felt.
Been there. It's like, what am I even doing wrong?
Totally. So Galway, being the kind of out-of-the-box thinker that he was,
Always thinking differently.
he tells Joan, okay, this time I actually want you to try and hit the frame on purpose.
Wait, what? That's his advice.
I know it sounds crazy, but trust me, there's a method to his madness.
Okay, I'm listening.
So Joan's like, okay, if you say so. And she focuses all her attention on hitting the frame, trying to get it just right.
No way. And she actually starts hitting the ball?
She starts hitting the ball. And not just hitting it, but hitting it well.
Because she stopped overthinking it. Her mind was focused on something else, so her body could just do its thing.
Exactly. It's like her self, too, her natural ability, was finally able to come out and play without the inner critic screaming in her ear.
That's so powerful. It's like a light bulb moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize how much we get in our own way without even realizing it.
Totally. We're often our own biggest obstacle to success.
Okay, so the big question is, how do we actually quiet that inner critic, that self-one? Because let's be real, it can be pretty persistent.
It's like a broken record sometimes, right?
Mhm.
It just keeps playing those same negative messages over and over.
Exactly. So how do we hit the mute button, or at least turn down the volume a bit?
Well, it's not so much about completely silencing it as it is about changing how we relate to it.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we change that relationship with our inner critic?
Galway talks about the importance of letting go of judgment.
Easier said than done, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not about pretending mistakes don't happen. It's more about observing them without that harsh self-criticism.
So it's like separating the action from our evaluation of the action.
Exactly. Instead of beating yourself up for messing up, you just observe it. Okay, I hit the frame. What can I learn from that?
So it's about being curious about our mistakes rather than afraid of them.
Exactly. It's about approaching learning with a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset.
And that makes total sense. When we're constantly afraid of making mistakes, it's like we're paralyzing ourselves.
Exactly. Fear is the enemy of progress, you
Mhm.
know? It keeps us stuck in our comfort zones.
Okay, so we need to embrace the mistakes, learn from them.
And Galway has this other great story about a businessman named Jack who was convinced he had a terrible backhand.
Oh, poor Jack. Everyone has that one shot they just can't seem to master.
Right. And he had tried everything. Coaches, drills, you name it.
Nothing seemed to work.
Nothing. He was at his wit's end, ready to just give up on tennis altogether.
So what did Galway do?
He asked Jack this really simple but profound question. Have you ever actually observed your backswing without judging it?
Wow. I bet that stopped Jack in his tracks.
It did. Jack had been so busy trying to fix his backhand that he never actually took the time to just observe it without judgment, to see what was really going on.
He was too busy criticizing himself to actually see what he was doing.
Exactly. And that's such a common thing, isn't it? We get so caught up in our heads that we forget to actually pay attention to what our bodies are doing.
So, what happened? Did Jack's backhand magically improve overnight?
Well, not overnight, but Galway had him use a mirror to watch his backswing in slow motion.
So he could really see what was happening without all the self-judgment clouding his vision.
Exactly. And guess what? As soon as he started observing his movements objectively, his backhand started to improve.
No way. Just from observing without judging.
That's the power of quieting the inner critic. Sometimes just seeing things clearly without all the negative self-talk can make all the difference.
It's like our bodies already know what to do. We just need to get out of our own way.
Exactly. Our bodies are capable of amazing things when we give them the chance.
And it makes you think, right? How often are we our own worst enemies? Not just in tennis, but in all areas of life.
All the time. Whether it's learning a new language, trying to start a business, even just having a difficult conversation, that inner critic can really hold us back.
It's like we're constantly sabotaging ourselves with our own thoughts.
And on the flip side, when we can quiet that inner critic even just a little bit, it opens up so many more possibilities.
Yeah. We can finally start to tap into that potential that's always been there, just waiting to be unleashed.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need to learn to trust that self too a little bit more, like get out of our own heads and let our natural abilities take over.
Exactly. And Galway talks a lot about this idea of trusting self too.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? Because it's one thing to say trust yourself, but it's another thing to actually do it, right?
It is. It's easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, because we're so used to like analyzing everything, second-guessing ourselves.
Totally. We're conditioned to think that we need to be in control, especially when it comes to learning something new.
So how do we break free from that?
Well, one thing Galway points out is how differently children approach learning.
Oh, that's so true. They just kind of dive in, don't they?
Exactly. Think about a kid learning to ride a bike. They're not afraid to fall. They just keep getting back on and trying again, trusting their instincts.
And they're not worried about looking silly or messing up.
Right. They're not bogged down by all that self-consciousness, that fear of failure.
It's almost like somewhere along the way, we lose that sense of playfulness, that willingness to experiment.
We do. And that's a shame because that's where so much growth happens.
So how do we tap back into that childlike approach?
Galway has this really interesting experiment in the book where he had tennis players hit serves without aiming.
Wait, what? Without aiming? How does that even work?
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, right? But that's the point.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So he tells them, just relax, let go of trying to control the outcome, and just hit the ball.
And what happens?
People often find that they hit with more power, more accuracy when they stop overthinking it.
Wow, that's wild. It's like their body just takes over and knows what to do.
Exactly. And it's not just a tennis thing either. This
Mhm.
applies to so many areas of life.
Because like the less we try to force it, the better the result.
Often, yeah.
Yeah,
It's about getting out of your own way and letting your natural abilities shine through.
I like that. Okay, so we've got quieting the inner critic, trusting our intuition more, but there's another piece to this whole inner game puzzle, right?
There is. And it might be the most important piece of all. Focused awareness.
Okay, tell me more about that. What is focused awareness?
It's about being fully present in the moment without letting your mind wander.
Oh, okay, mindfulness, right, like
Ah.
meditation and stuff.
It's definitely related to mindfulness, but Galway applies it specifically to the game of tennis and, by extension, to any performance situation.
So it's not just about being present in general, it's about being super focused on the task at hand.
Exactly. Because when your mind is wandering, that's when mistakes happen, when you get anxious, when you miss opportunities.
So it's like you're not really there for the experience, you're just going through the motions.
Exactly. And he gives some really practical techniques for developing this kind of laser-like focus.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
One of the simplest but most effective is just watching the seams of the tennis ball as it comes towards you.
Seriously, just staring at the seams, that's all it takes.
It sounds almost too easy, but it works because it forces your mind to zero in on those tiny details.
So it's about finding something specific to focus on, to anchor your attention.
Exactly. And when your mind is occupied with those sensory details, it has less space for doubt and worry to creep in.
It's like a form of meditation, almost. Like instead of focusing on your breath, you're focusing on the seams of a tennis ball.
Right. It's about training your mind to stay present, to resist those distractions that are always pulling us away from the moment.
And those distractions can be brutal, especially in our hyper-connected world.
They are. We're constantly bombarded with information, notifications, to-do lists. It's no wonder our minds are frazzled.
So we need to be intentional about cultivating that focused awareness.
We do. And Galway has some other cool techniques too. Like he talks about this exercise where you say bounce when the ball bounces and hit when you hit it.
Okay, that sounds kind of silly, but I get it. It's about syncing your actions and your awareness.
Exactly. It's about bringing your full attention to each moment, not letting your mind get ahead of itself.
And I imagine that helps with things like anticipation and timing, too.
Absolutely. When you're fully present, you're more likely to pick up on those subtle cues that help you perform at your best.
So we're training our minds to be more present, more aware. Okay, I like this.
And the cool thing is, these techniques aren't just for tennis players, you know?
No, I was just thinking that. Like, how could I apply this watching the seams idea to my own life?
Totally. Imagine you're feeling overwhelmed at work, like you've got a million things on your plate.
Oh, tell me about it. That's like my default state these days.
Right. So instead of stressing about everything at once, try focusing on one task at a time, really immersing yourself in the details of completing that task before moving on to the next.
So it's about breaking things down, finding those focal points to anchor your attention.
Exactly. It's like those seams on the tennis ball. You're giving your mind something specific to lock onto.
I can see how that would be helpful. Like even just doing the dishes instead of letting my mind race with all the other things I need to do, I could just focus on the feel of the water, the soap, the act of scrubbing.
Exactly. It's about bringing that same level of focus and presence to those everyday tasks that we often rush through or do mindlessly.
It's about finding those little moments of mindfulness throughout the day.
Yes. And the more we practice this kind of focused awareness, the more it becomes a habit, a way of being in the world.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Quieting the inner critic, trusting our intuition, cultivating focused awareness. This is already a game changer.
Right. And these are just a few of the key concepts from the inner game of tennis. But it gets even juicier.
Oh, there's more. Don't leave me hanging.
Okay, so Galway also dives into this fascinating idea of the games we play, both on and off the court.
Games. What do you mean by that? Like mind games?
Kind of. He's talking about the hidden motivations and beliefs that drive our behavior, often without us even realizing it.
Okay, this sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
So Galway argues that we often play these games on the tennis court that go beyond just trying to win the match.
Okay, so it's not just about the score.
Right. He says we bring all sorts of baggage to the game, our own personal hangups and insecurities.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, he gives these games fun names like Goodo, Funno, Helfo, and each game has its own set of rules and objectives.
So it's like we're all playing these different games within the game without even realizing it.
Exactly. And these games are often driven by our need for validation, control, approval from others, all those things that our ego loves to latch onto.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So, like, someone who's really caught up in playing Goodo might be obsessed with having perfect technique, even if it means they're not actually having fun.
Exactly. They're so focused on looking good, on impressing others, that they forget about the joy of the game itself.
They're playing to win someone else's approval instead of their own.
Right. Or someone who's playing Compedo might get so fixated on beating their opponent that they lose sight of the bigger picture, the spirit of sportsmanship.
It's like they're so busy trying to conquer the other person that they forget about the opportunity to conquer themselves, to push their own limits.
That's a great way to put it. And the thing is, these games don't just play out on the tennis court.
Oh, I was just thinking that. It's like we bring these same patterns of behavior to all areas of life.
Exactly. Think about your own life for a second. What are the games you play? What are those patterns of behavior that keep tripping you up?
That's a good question. I'm definitely guilty of playing people pleaser sometimes.
A lot of us are.
Yeah.
It's that need to make everyone happy, even at the expense of our own well-being.
And then there's Procrastination Pro, always finding ways to put things off until the last minute.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic one. And the thing about these games is they often stem from a place of fear.
Fear of failure, fear of judgment.
Exactly. And Galway argues that the key to breaking free from these self-sabotaging games is to first become aware of them.
So it's that self-awareness piece. again, right?
Exactly. Once you can see the games you're playing, you can start to make different choices.
You can start to rewrite the rules of the game.
Exactly. You can choose to play a game that's more aligned with your values, with your goals, with who you really want to be in the world.
Okay, I like that.
Perfect.
So how do we actually start to rewrite those rules? How do we break free from those old patterns?
Well, Galway talks about the importance of redefining what it means to win.
Redefining winning. Okay, I'm
Well,
like,
because often we're so caught up in trying to win by someone else's definition that we forget about what truly matters to us.
it's like we're playing someone else's game instead of our own.
Exactly. And to really drive this point home, Galway shares his own personal struggles with the game of Perfecto.
Perfecto. What's that?
It's that need to be perfect, to never make a mistake, to always be in control.
Oh, yeah, I know that game well. It's exhausting.
It is. And Galway was so caught up in trying to be the perfect tennis player, the perfect coach, that he lost sight of the joy of the game.
He was so focused on the outcome that he forgot about the process.
Exactly. And it wasn't until he learned to let go of that need for perfection, to embrace the inevitable mistakes and imperfections, that he was able to truly enjoy the game again.
It's a good reminder that even the experts struggle with these inner games.
We all do, and that's why it's so important to be compassionate with ourselves, to remember that we're all works in progress.
And to celebrate those moments when we do manage to break free from those old patterns, even if it's just for a little while.
Absolutely. Every small victory counts.
So much good stuff in this book, you know. I mean, we're talking about quieting that inner critic, learning to trust our gut, finding that focused awareness. Like, it's incredible.
It really is. And you know what's interesting? All of this, it's not just about like acing your tennis game, it's about acing life.
Exactly. But how do we actually take all these tennis analogies and use them in our everyday lives?
Yeah.
You know, like dealing with a tough job or navigating those tricky relationships.
It's about finding that inner stability. That's what Galway calls it.
Inner stability. Okay, I like that. So what does that actually look like? Is it like being unflappable no matter what life throws at you?
Kind of, yeah. It's that ability to stay calm and centered even when everything around you feels chaotic.
Okay, sign me up. How do we get some of that?
Well, a big part of it is recognizing what self-2 actually needs.
Okay, so back to self-2. I'm with you. It's like we're giving that part of ourselves more airtime.
Exactly. Because self-2, that's the part of us that wants to learn and grow and experience joy.
So instead of constantly trying to please that inner critic,
Yeah.
we're asking, hey, what do I actually need right now?
Yes. And you know, one of the biggest roadblocks to finding that inner peace, Galway says it's attachment.
Attachment, like getting too attached to things.
Exactly. Like clinging too tightly to things we can't control. Situations, outcomes, even
Like,
people.
Yeah. Letting go. It's always easier said than done, right?
Oh, 100%. But it's not about like giving up on everything you care about. It's more about recognizing that real happiness, that deep down fulfillment that comes from within.
So it's an inside job.
Exactly. It's not something you can chase down or force, you know.
He tells this crazy story in the book about driving in a blizzard. Right.
Oh, yeah, that one's intense.
His car skids off the road. He's stranded, freezing cold, miles from anywhere. Pretty scary stuff.
And he's basically facing death right there in that moment.
So what happens?
Galway says he reached this point of just complete acceptance. Like, he let go of that desperate need to survive.
Wow, so he just surrendered to the situation.
He did, and that's when something amazing happened. He describes the surge of energy, almost like a switch flipped inside him.
No way. What happened?
He was able to run for miles in this blizzard until he found help.
You're kidding. In the middle of a blizzard. After being stranded.
Yep. He called it a kind of abandon, like he let go of self-one's fear and tapped into this deeper well of strength within himself, the strength of self-2.
It's incredible, right? It's like in those moments when we finally let go, that's when we find this hidden strength we didn't even know we had.
It's like that saying, let go or be dragged. Sometimes surrendering is the most powerful thing we can do.
So if you had to sum up like the biggest takeaway from the inner game of tennis, what would it be?
Honestly, it's about trusting yourself. Trusting that you already have everything you need within you to face whatever life throws your way. It's about quieting that inner critic and letting your true self shine through.
It's about mastering that inner game so you can win at the game of life.
This has been amazing. So much to think about. Everyone listening, seriously check out the inner game of tennis. You won't regret it. And hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the inner game. We'll catch you next week with a brand new topic and a whole new set of insights. Until then, keep exploring, keep playing, and keep trusting that inner wisdom.